We finally made it to draft day, and the rumors are swirling at 100 miles an hour. Trading up for Abdul Carter, trading down for Kelvin Banks. What's real and what's a smokescreen? We'll go through all of it on today's Locked On Bears podcast.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1. You can read my writing over at Chicago Bears on SI, and you can follow Locked On Bears on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, where you can keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. Terms and conditions apply. On the show today, I want to go through all of the biggest Bears draft rumors coming up in the final hours before draft weekend officially begins, including a bunch of smoke about trading up into the top 5 for the top pass rusher in the NFL draft. A lot of talk about, if they don't trade up, maybe Texas offensive tackle Kelvin Banks could kind of be the plan B if somebody like Ashton Jeanty or Mason Graham doesn't fall to the Bears at 10. And more specifically, I want to look at how real some of the stuff might be versus what might just be smokescreens to throw us off the scent of what the Bears actually want to do on draft day. But the trade-up buzz for the Bears had been sort of simmering for a little while. I was like, could this be a team that trades up for, say, Ashton Jeanty, the running back from Boise State, that maybe, to the Jacksonville Jaguars pick at number 5 or the Las Vegas Raiders pick at number 6 to make sure that the Bears land the top playmaking running back in this draft class. But as we got closer to draft day, those trade murmurings took I was going to say a hard right turn, but really more stepped on the gas, because now it's not about trading up to 5 or 6 for Ashton Jeanty, but it's about trading up as high as number 3 to the New York Giants for Penn State pass rusher Abdul Carter. Now, I always try and be careful when it comes to draft rumors, especially on Twitter, because there are a lot of people out there that purport to be insiders, but they really don't have any sources, but it's easy to make up a report and use some really careful language so that you're not pinning yourself down, so you can never be proven wrong by wording it in just the right way and always throwing a bunch of stuff at the wall and saying what sticks. There's a lot of fake Bears insiders out there. But this report came from a reporter for the New York Daily News, not somebody who covers the Bears, but somebody who covers the New York Giants. Pat Leonard tweeted that Chicago Bears are looking to move up, and he also noted that multiple teams ahead of the Bears are open to moving back. But we've heard from Leonard and others that Chicago has had conversations with the New York Giants specifically about potentially trying to get to 3 to take Abdul Carter. I don't know that we've had specific reports of any conversations with the Patriots at 4, but that seems to be like the range the Bears are looking at here, where if Cam Ward goes number 1 to the Titans, as everyone fully knows at this point, and then presumably Travis Hunter goes number 2 to the Cleveland Browns, that would leave the Giants likely to take Penn State's Abdul Carter number 3, unless they go quarterback there, or unless the Browns go quarterback at number 2. If somebody like Shedeur Sanders goes top 3, then maybe Travis Hunter could then go 3, Carter could make it to 4, and that could change a little bit of the Bears' potential trade-up math. But clearly, this would be a bombshell type of trade, a blockbuster trade to move from 10 into the top 4 of this draft. It would shake up the entire draft for everyone else, and it would require a huge, significant investment from the Bears to go up that high. Everyone likes to just take the draft trade chart and do the math on, okay, well, the 3rd pick is worth this many points, and the 10th pick is worth this many points, and so if you just add enough points from another pick, you can get up there. But when you're trading in the top 5, the math on that changes a little bit, and teams don't tend to follow that board very tightly when it comes to moving from the top 5 down outside, to 10, right? Those bigger moves have a more premium type of investment. So for me, we haven't heard anything specific about what compensation would have to look like. But if you look back at trends for recent blockbuster trades into the top 3, at a bare minimum, it would cost the Bears 2026 first round pick. Like you would have to give up 10 and next year's first to get up to 3 to the New York Giants. You may have to throw in more than that. And that adds, I know if you do the draft trade chart, was that more than what the chart says? Yes, because that's what it costs to get into the top 3 of the NFL draft when you're going all the way from 10. If you're going from 3 to 5, those are a little bit more reasonable. You don't have to overspend and move a couple spots within the top 5, but to go from 10 to 3 is going to cost at least next year's first and probably another pick from this year's draft. Maybe it's a first and a third this year and then next year's first. Would not surprise me if that's the kind of price the New York Giants are demanding for that spot, because the Giants would be perfectly happy staying there and taking Abdul Carter. It's not as though the Giants are eager to move down and they don't want any of these players, so they're happy to move down because they don't really want to be at 3 anyway. This is a Giants team that wants to be there and wants to take that player there. So you have to give them an offer that blows them away so that they would be willing to pass on that player and wouldn't take that player and would go back to 10 where the Bears don't even want to be. So why do the Giants want to be at 10 unless you really give them a super great offer? So I don't know that Ryan Poles is actually going to be willing to spend what it takes to get to 3. I think Ryan Poles is looking at this saying, hey, if I can find a good deal to move up into the top 5 and get a top 5 caliber player, I will do that if I can indeed get good value. Like if teams are eager to move down, which I don't think the Giants are, but maybe the Patriots at 4 or the Jaguars at 5 could be more willing to move down. But the Giants having a chance at one of the true blue chip players in this draft, whether it's Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter there, like that's going to be hard to pry them out of that spot. And so I don't expect the Bears may ultimately make this level of a huge blockbuster trade up to number 3 for Abdul Carter, but you can certainly understand why they would want to. I mean, Abdul Carter is far and away the best pass rusher in this draft class, and one of these players who might be one of the best pass rushers of the last few draft class. Because you think about, like, last year there wasn't that truly elite edge rusher. I think the first guy off the board was Leatu Latu, and then Dallas Turner went pretty quickly after that, and Jared Verse. But those guys were mid-first round picks. And so, I think somebody like Abdul Carter is more in the Will Anderson top of the draft conversation, or like Aiden Hutchinson, 2 years or 3 years ago now. Like, he's in that caliber of pass rusher here. You can see Ryan Poles saying, hey, this is probably the biggest need lingering on the Bears roster, is like one more pass rusher to mix into this defensive line. There's clearly one guy who's better than the rest. If you could trade up at a reasonable price, because it's a buyer's market, I think it's worth making those calls. But I think there's a reason the reporting has been the Giants have been telling the Bears no, is because Ryan Poles is not going to overspend on draft trade just to get Abdul Carter, but wanted to at least see and find out if that's something that could be done. I still think a trade up for somebody like Mason Graham from Michigan isn't out of the question either, because it'd be cheaper to get up to 5, 6, or 7 for Mason Graham than it is to get to like 3 or 4 for Abdul Carter. And I don't think the Bears are going to trade up for Ashton Genty specifically, in part because I think Genty's going to end up going 5 to the Jaguars or maybe 6 to the Raiders in that area there. So that's where I think I believe there is truth and validity to the idea that the Bears have called about moving up in the top 3 for Abdul Carter. Like, I don't think it's a fake rumor, but I also don't think it's likely to actually happen on game day or on draft day. I think what's more likely is that they end up either staying at 10 or moving down from 10 and taking someone like Texas offensive tackle Kelvin Banks, who's also been a very hot rumor for the Bears. And we'll explore why that might be and what that might look like and how much truth there is to that one next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by our friends at Monarch Money. Do you ever check your bank account and wonder, whoa, where did all my money go so quickly? Between dining out and online shopping, entertainment, it can be easy to lose track. But that's where Monarch Money comes in, because Monarch Money is your personal CFO that gives you full visibility and control over your finances. I use the Monarch Money app on my phone, and it's super helpful because it's got all of my different accounts and spending all in one place. Instead of having multiple apps where, one is for my checking account, my bank account, right? Then I've got one app that's for my retirement accounts. I've got one app that's for my credit cards. And if I want to stay on top of everything, I have to kind of bounce around each app and see how everything's doing. With Monarch Money, it's all in one convenience. It's a complete financial command center. So you can stop just managing your money and start actually building wealth. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, promo code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. The Locked On Bears podcast is also brought to you by Gametime, the best way to get tickets for all of your favorite live events. There's nothing like the atmosphere of an NBA playoff game, for example. Every bucket, every defensive stop, every moment feels huge. That electricity in the arena is unbeatable. And with Gametime, you can be part of it without the last-minute stress of ticket hunting. I love the Gametime app. I use it all the time. Another app that I'm a big fan of. I've bought Bears tickets on Gametime. I've bought concert tickets on Gametime. I've seen comedians on Gametime, theater shows. They got all of your favorite live events in your arena, even when the demand is sky high. And with their all-in pricing, then there's no surprise fees at checkout. So you know exactly how much you're going to pay when you pick your tickets. It doesn't end up costing way more than you thought it would. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem that code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. So the Abdul Carter rumors are big and exciting and splashy blockbuster that would certainly, it'd be a wild draft day with an Abdul Carter trade up. I think less likely to happen. The other Bears draft rumor that's been more persistent and less exciting is interest in offensive tackle Kelvin Banks from Texas, someone who some draft analysts view as a guard at the next level. It's a similar conversation to Will Campbell from LSU, just pretty universally viewed below Will Campbell. I guess not universally. I know former Chicago Bear Kyle Long and the folks over at CBS Sports, and Mike Renner, a friend of the show, they both have Kelvin Banks as the number one offensive tackle in this class above Will Campbell and Armand Membu. He's definitely, at least in this conversation, in that top tier of tackle prospects, and I think there's a little bit of a drop-off once you get much farther beyond Kelvin Banks. But this one doesn't come with like a specific report, but when you look around at people with good information that put together mock drafts. We've seen Chicago Tribune Bears reporter Brad Biggs link the Bears to Kelvin Banks multiple times, and he is as plugged in as any. He is the most plugged in. I can pretty confidently say that he is the most plugged in with the Bears front office of anybody covering the Chicago Bears. And I think we should all pay more attention to what the information Brad Biggs provides because of what he knows. And I've seen firsthand him work his sources in a way that is impressive. That's all I'll say about that. But then other national guys who tend to have good NFL draft information. Peter Schrager from NFL Network, who's now I think at ESPN and has the Bears with Kelvin Banks in his mock draft. I think a handful of Albert Breer has connected the Bears to Kelvin Banks. Like there has been a lot of directional knowledge of Banks and the Bears here in a way that's hard to ignore. And I've seen a lot of pushback from Chicago Bears fans saying, we don't want Kelvin Banks. This is bad, worst case disaster or whatever. And I certainly am not there. I think there are better options than Kelvin Banks, but I don't think anyone should be disappointed if the Bears take Kelvin Banks. We can say confidently the Bears view Kelvin Banks as a left tackle. The Bears have told Will Campbell they view him as a left tackle. And the Bears offensive line coach has said pretty publicly that they see Will Campbell as a left tackle. And so if they see a short-armed offensive tackle prospect in Will Campbell as a left tackle, then they're certainly going to see Kelvin Banks as a left tackle because Kelvin Banks' arms are longer and his wingspan is much, much longer. Like as much as everyone has been consternating about are these offensive tackles or guards, how long are their arms, and oh no, is Will Campbell a guard or not? Well, Membu is more of a tackle than Campbell because his arms are a little bit longer. You might be surprised to know that among all of the first-round offensive tackle prospects, do you know who has the longest wingspan? So not arm length. Arm length is from like the shoulder down to the fingertip. But of course, then wingspan is from one fingertip to the other. The longest wingspan among Will Campbell, Armand Membu, Kelvin Banks, Josh Simmons, and Josh Conerly, the 5 first-round offensive tackles. Longest wingspan belongs to Kelvin Banks of Texas. His arms are 33.5 inches, which is the same as Membu, a little longer than Campbell, but definitely a lot shorter than Simmons or Conerly. But Banks has the longest wingspan at 83.75 inches. His wingspan is longer than Josh Simmons, than Josh Conerly, than Armand Membu, because he's got a really wide torso. This is a wide-bodied offensive tackle who is still very light on his feet, moves very well from that tackle position, and I think, to me, can hold up just fine at the tackle position in the NFL. I understand the idea of moving him inside the guard, and I like the flexibility there to where, depending on how things play out with a Joe Thuney contract extension or a Jonah Jackson contract extension, maybe in the future, could you end up moving Banks into tackle if Karan Amagaji develops or if Braxton Jones develops or whatever, whatever that might end up looking like there. Like, to me, I like having that flexibility, but I also fully trust him as an offensive tackle prospect in this draft class. Like, yes, maybe the length is a little bit suboptimal there, but he's got the strength, he's got the broad frame to be able to withstand some of the length of pass rushers that are coming against him in the NFL. Someone who's been durable, someone who's smart, someone who's got good technique. He gets out well in space in the running game as well. He's got good hands. Like, there's just he's pretty technically sound at that position. And so I feel, to me, like, wow, if the Bears even stay at 10 or move down and get a franchise left tackle, I don't understand why people would be so upset about it. I mean, I think the upset is that people don't feel like he's a franchise left tackle. There are people that feel like he's a guard and say, I don't want to take a guard with the 10th overall pick. That I understand. Like, if Banks ends up failing at tackle and moving inside the guard, like, that's something I can accept being disappointed in. But I think he's a quality enough tackle prospect that you can be happy with him. He's not Joe Alt, right? He might not be a Pro Bowl, can't miss, blue chip caliber player, but it's not as though picking him at 10 is going to be some kind of major reach, even if the Bears don't trade down. You look at each of the last 3 NFL drafts, we have seen 3 offensive tackles go in the top 11 of the last 3 drafts, including Darnell Wright 2 years ago. So if Will Campbell and Armand Membu go in the top 10, Kelvin Banks going 10 is not a crazy selection. Albert Breer says Kelvin Banks isn't getting out of the top 11, that the lowest he could go is probably the San Francisco 49ers with the 11th pick. If you look at the last 5 NFL drafts, you've seen 4 offensive linemen go in the top 15. So, like, every year, offensive linemen and especially tackles all go earlier than you might think. And so even though mock drafts have had Kelvin Banks, in the 15s to the 20s sometimes, I just don't think that's where reality is going to be. And that doesn't mean it's then going to be a reach when he does end up going in the top 12 of this draft class. That just because it was that way in mock drafts doesn't mean that's how NFL teams have actually read the situation. And so that's where I think I don't think it's a reach at all to take a player like Kelvin Banks at 10. Obviously, you would prefer if you could trade down a couple spots and still get that player you wanted at 10. I think that would make a lot of sense. But I just think the specific people who have connected Kelvin Banks to the Bears, and also the timing of Kelvin Banks to the Bears, to me, I think there's some real credibility here. It's not a guarantee that they're going to then take Kelvin Banks, but I think as we've seen smokescreens come out in recent years, I think there's some trends we can point to as to when and how and where those smokescreens come out, and then what the Bears end up actually doing was things that we had heard as a possibility, and it was just a matter of trying to figure out which one was real. And there's something about this Kelvin Banks talk that feels like previous years' examples of real intel on the Bears draft that was then tried to be clouded by other smokescreens that came out around it, but this one ended up being the real one. That's kind of how I'm feeling right now about Kelvin Banks. It's not a perfect prediction here, because of course, if Ashton Genty falls to 10 or Mason Graham falls to 10, like, there are players the Bears are going to take over Kelvin Banks. I don't think Kelvin Banks is their top choice of whoever they could want, but I think he's kind of the backup plan of depending on how the rest of the draft plays out. And that I think I have more confidence in being real. But we'll compare this to some previous NFL draft smokescreens that proved to be wrong, but were certainly intriguing in the lead up to the draft. Next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by our friends at LinkedIn Jobs. As a small business owner, your work doesn't end when the clock hits 5. Your business is always on your mind, which means when it's time to hire, you need a partner that works just as hard as you do. And that's where LinkedIn Jobs comes in, because when you clock out, LinkedIn clocks in. LinkedIn makes it easy to post your job for free, share it with your network, and get qualified candidates all in one place, because LinkedIn is full of them. I'm on LinkedIn. I bet you're on LinkedIn. And if you're not, a lot of your friends, family members, and coworkers are all on the LinkedIn platform. And we might not all be actively looking for jobs, but LinkedIn will still put your job in front of us that, hey, maybe the right opportunity, all of a sudden, we could be interested. No wonder 72% of small businesses say LinkedIn helps them find high quality hires. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. It's always really hard to tell what's true and what's not with these pre-draft rumors and smokescreens, and trying to figure out what's got some actual legs and what is just trying to distract you and other teams from what the Bears actually want to do. And I will say, like, generally speaking, when credible reporters put out this information, it's not that they're lying and end up being wrong, right? It's not that they're lying. It's that they got the information from somebody and passed that information along, but that information was maybe given to that reporter with the idea of putting it out falsely. And in a lot of ways, there's no way for the reporter to then, you can't go to the Chicago Bears and say, hey, is it true you want to trade up for Abdul Carter? They're not gonna confirm any of those reports. And so, like, I don't think with real credible reporters, you know, the Albert Breers, the Diana Rossinis, the Brad Biggses of the world, if they put out a draft rumor about the Bears and it ends up being wrong, that was not them lying or making something up. That was them getting information from someone who wanted that information out there to benefit them. Now, I think there are a lot of fake insider Twitter accounts that put out information that they're just making up and lying, but the real reporters are not. And so every year this happens, where we get information that the Bears are interested in X, Y, or Z player, or moving up to this spot or moving down to this spot. And of course, most of it ends up being wrong, because, you know, only one of those possibilities can actually happen. And so the other 5 or 6 don't end up happening. And you wonder, well, wait a minute, like, why was that reported so strongly? And how can we know then which one should actually be true? And I think, first of all, there's been a pattern, I think, where about anywhere from like 1 to 2 weeks before draft day, you start to see this coagulation of, and a triangulation of, like, narrowing down who the Bears might be interested in. And we saw this last, I mean, obviously Caleb Williams was a different story last season, but I think with Rome Odunze, it was around like a week or 2 before the draft when there was, we all were pretty clear that, like, the Bears were hoping Rome Odunze would fall to them. We kind of thought Marvin Harrison and Malik Neighbors would probably go before the Bears picked. We didn't know exactly how many would make it to 9 or who exactly would make it to 9, but we figured Harrison would be gone for sure. Neighbors would probably be gone, and we thought Odunze would probably be gone too, but he ends up making it to 9, and we take him, and it wasn't like this big surprise. It wasn't a huge, you know, smoke screen that they liked Rome Odunze. But in the, like, day or 2 before the draft last year, Smokescreen came out that the Bears actually were really interested in defensive tackle Byron Murphy from Texas. That, the Bears might take a defensive lineman at that point in the draft and really upgrade that part of their defensive line, especially, you know, if the wide receivers aren't able to make it there, and this is just going to be the best player available to kind of build out that need for them. And of course, that's not true. And in the lead up to the draft, also, I believe it was Diana Rossini, and this is not a shot at her, it's just for accuracy. I believe in the lead up to the draft last year, there were reports of the Bears looking to trade down from number 9 and accepting offers from teams to move up to try and get into that top 10. And of course, they stayed there and they took Rome Odunze. And maybe the Bears were looking at trading down had Odunze not been there, but those things ended up being smoke screens. The Odunze interest ended up being true. Or I think back to 2023, you know, the Darnell Wright draft. And I think for a while in the pre-draft process, we were debating. We knew offensive tackle was probably where the Bears were going to go, but it was a matter of, like, can they get Paris Johnson from Ohio State? Maybe somebody like Peter Skoronski from Northwestern. Do they view Skoronski as a tackle or a guard? And it wasn't until about a week or 2 before the draft that I'm pretty sure it was Brad Biggs of the Chicago Tribune starts mocking Darnell Wright to the Bears with the 10th overall pick, saying, hey, this is a tackle that I think the Bears could actually be legitimately interested in. And then a couple of days before the draft, there was a huge push about, Broderick Jones. The Bears actually really like Georgia offensive tackle Broderick Jones, and there were reports that he could be a dark horse candidate for the Bears at 10, and that the Bears are actually in love with Broderick Jones. And of course, they weren't. They took Darnell Wright instead. They could have taken Broderick Jones, but they chose not to. And that smoke was kind of distracting, was trying to distract you and other teams from their actual interest in Darnell Wright that kind of slipped out in there for a little while and then got covered up by a bunch of smoke. The same thing with like the Jalen Carter discussion. You remember in the lead up to the draft 2 years ago? The Bears are trying to trade up for Jalen Carter. The Bears are going to be all in on Jalen Carter. The Bears are praying Jalen Carter makes it to them where they were drafting at the time, 9, and they traded down to 10, but praying Jalen Carter makes it down to them. And what happens? Jalen Carter does make it down to them, and they pass on him. They trade down and take Darnell Wright instead. Those were smoke screens put out to distract from, the real information, Darnell Wright is out there. And so, to me, there's a lot of parallels to this year with Kelvin Banks. That's kind of what I come back to here. I think Kelvin Banks is sort of the Darnell Wright in this conversation, where that's the smokescreen. That's the draft rumor I think I believe the most in. It seems the most credible based on the timing, based on the people who have put it out there, and now based on the information blitz that comes out after everyone seems to be narrowing in on who the Bears might actually want with that pick, just to muddy the waters, where if we were confident for a couple of days that it was going to be Banks, well, now we can't be confident because they could be trading up for Carter, or they could be trading up for Genty, or Adam Schefter said the Bears are praying Genty makes it to 10, and like that feels to me kind of like the Jalen Carter conversation. They're praying he makes it to 10, but they're certainly not going to trade up for him, and even if he's there, I'm not sure that they're actually going to take him there. I think it's convenient for the Bears to put that out there to let other teams know, hey, we want Genty, so that you'll take Genty so that somebody they want will fall farther. Like, we have not heard any kind of talk about the Bears loving Mason Graham. You know how quiet it has been about the Bears and Mason Graham from Michigan? We haven't heard them connected whatsoever. And I think that's really intentional. I think the Bears want you to think they love Tyler Warren. They want you to think they love Ashton Genty. They want you to think they're trading up for Abdul Carter. When in reality, I would bet they want Mason Graham from Michigan and maybe could trade up for him. And then if he's not there at 10, Kelvin Banks is probably your plan B. Like that's ultimately where I land on this draft. I think the Bears have been strategic about the information game. I think everything that's coming out like right now in the 48 hours lead up to the draft is distraction. I think the Kelvin Banks rumors came out in the time period and from the people that I think have the most merit to it. And I think the lack of any kind of smoke around Mason Graham is where I'm pinning down on this draft. Mason Graham, and then maybe like Colston Loveland, another Michigan tight end. It's nothing to do with Michigan. I just think those are two players that I suspect the Bears like a lot more than we think they do, because we haven't heard them really say much of anything about them. We haven't heard rumors connecting the team to them much at all. And so that's what I'm really going to be most laser focused on during draft day. During draft day, we're going to have a bunch of updates for you coming here in the Locked On Bears podcast. We'll have a podcast for you Friday morning. Of course, we'll have some breaking news clips coming in when the draft pick is made. We'll break down the first round pick and then look ahead to what their options are in the second round. I still think there's a good possibility they trade up from 39 and maybe even get back into the first round and make 2 first round picks. We'll see. It's going to be an exciting and wild NFL draft weekend. And I hope you'll follow along with us here on the Locked On Bears podcast. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. That's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You can always find more draft coverage here on the Locked On Podcast Network with the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast, Locked On NFL. We also have Locked On NFL Scouting with Joe Marino and Kyle Krabs. And we've got you'll never run out of draft coverage content here in the Locked On Podcast Network. So make one of those your second listen today. Then coming back tomorrow, make Locked On Bears your first listen once again for another opportunity to bear down.